Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of an VNture podcast featuring myself, Taros113, and MR. Today's episode will be about musical themes in visual novels. Music is an inherent part of every visual novel, but some titles take music and put it at the forefront. And today we wanted to talk and discuss some of these titles and how the soundtrack ties in to these stories. So, MR, without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, let me start with Camino Rhapsody. And what a title it is to unpack. For those unaware, I probably should mention this is an Eushuli title, meaning it has heavy reliance on gameplay and has certain expectations when it comes to, how can I say, the game procedure. Let me explain. The most famous example, the God Alchemy Meister from Eushuli, it was a gameplay-focused title, and this in kind is the same, in which you slowly but surely recruit more party members. So you begin with very limited amount of people, you go on a quests, and through various encounters you increase the number of people in your party. And the same is true here, although the situation is a bit different. The alchemy was about alchemy. Here, you're as a conductor. You're basically formulating party members, which at some point will contribute to your entourage with a piece of music. So for whatever plot convenience they thought up of, you go on a quest to meet certain challenges. To be honest, I am not sure what those were because I forgot the mission structure themselves, but the point was gather characters, negotiate with different species, because that's a very common part of Eushuli title, is that they like to have a fantasy story set in a fantastical world that incorporates all kinds of different creatures, races. And it's no different here. What's interesting is how they incorporate all those characters into your eventual troop. What I mean by that, you might recruit a rogue, a character that is sneaky, very fast, very thievery, with dual daggers. But at some point, when she contributes to your concert, she brings out the bottom half of the dagger and it's castanets, and she starts dancing and performing music that way. The main character himself also has, in addition to being a conductor, has a flute that doubles up as a rapier he uses. You even meet some characters with the odd combination of, for example, chainsaw that she uses to fight, and accordion that she uses to perform. So in that way, they incorporated dual roles of those characters. They are demon of something, insert chainsaw there, but on the side, it just so happens that she performs music too. And it's very convenient in that way. I mean, I can't...
So it's really cool that you have this standard fantasy setting with all sorts of, RPG style enemies and classes. You mentioned there was gameplay, right?
Yes.
Okay, so is the gameplay part like the classic, video game battle RPG, or is it something musical focused?
It's more classical. So, for example, you have a character that is an insect of sorts. It's kind of like a monster girl clam, big clam. And she's hard-shelled. She's basically a tank. That's her role, pretty much. And you go to those battles, you encounter some wild creatures, and you have to defeat them. There is no special, playing to peacefully resolve it. No, it's just a straight up magic damage kind of thing with old but gold trio of healer, DPS, and tank. But the way they incorporate to the story is, I'm a big clam, but I have clinking noises, and those clinking noises incorporate to the music you create. And basically the story revolves of your character, meaning the main protagonist, thinking how to incorporate different races into his performance and talking to them, and they give their feedback, they showcase, for example, what they can do, and he brings them in. So for example, you meet a horn-beast magician that it just so happens at the end of her staff she has bells, and mostly she used those bells to perform magic, but you could incorporate that to the musical score. Those kind of conveniences are for the story reasons, yet for the gameplay reasons she's basically a nuker, meaning from the traditional RPG she's basically a DPS mage.
Okay, so why, though, is there the whole musical side of things? Why is the main character recruiting all of these people for part of a musical entourage?
Like I said, the big goal on the horizon is to make a concert. And if I remember correctly, it was to be the next successor, to lead the country, something like that. So he has to prove himself with music.
Okay.
And it just so happens that the country itself is in turmoil with different races. Imagine that. So he has excuse to talk to various other countries, various other representatives, some of which might appear aggressive on the surface. For example, you meet the tribe of angels that are very combat focused. But after incorporating them and peacefully resolving the situation, you get a new team member that it just so happens that she plays a flute. Imagine that. So with all that build up, all that setup, you grow up experience when it comes to what music you want to perform. Instead of just having small entourage, you have bigger and bigger company. Everybody gives you feedback. Then it's the story evolves into product reflecting of how to incorporate everybody's strong points, yet still at the same time have cohesive music. And that was probably the highlight of the game, when you had few characters that clashed in tone. So you had a small training session, let's say 3 or 4 characters, and their music did not work completely. So you repeated it a few times until it finally clicked. They had something that could connect those notes. The clicking note with cascades, with flute, with harp. In addition to bass going to balance. Something like that. And slowly...
And this was what the story was about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that was slow build-up of how everybody could contribute. That's why I'm focusing on the aspect of the instruments rather than the story with spoilers themselves. I don't want to spoil, but the idea is everybody has some excuse of why they join, and most often than not that excuse is also tied up. I also can contribute to your band and your concert. This title specifically barely escaped mentioning in the previous episode about the disappointment, because the one thing that it all accumulates to the big moment, the concert, the one big performance of everybody in it, is basically a fade out. You do not hear everybody plays at the same time. And that's such a letdown, I cannot describe it.
It robbed you of the climax? Is that what you mean?
Exactly, there was no concert whatsoever. You basically fade out, and then fade back in, and everybody said, oh, that was amazing.
Too much to ask for in a music-focused story where the entire point is the main character trying to create a big orchestra, huh?
Exactly. Like I didn't expect
Come
some
on.
revolutionary music, but at the very least, please make one song, something that is special, that just is culmination of everything you trained up to this point. But no, it's such a missed opportunity, and specifically before in the character arcs when you had like a siren that lost her voice and you help her get back. Was it like that? I don't remember. I don't want to go too much into that. But basically, you get a siren, and she sings for your troop. However, you solve her issue. And obviously, during that portion, you heard some music, you heard some singing. There was a portion of that. Yet, in the final moment, the climactic, everything culminates to this one point. And it was skipped. For some reason, this title, however interesting it was on the story front, and however convenient sometimes the excuse was how some characters contribute to the music. For example, I think there was a centaur in your troop that was big muscular man that fights, and his contribution was he was clicking with his hooves on the ground, something like that. I mean, it's contrived, a little bit silly, but holy heck, it works.
Just so that everyone involved in the story can have some sort of musical capability.
Exactly. The final product you did not get to hear whatsoever. Even if for the sake of coherent music, let's say, you wouldn't incorporate everything, let's say, just some of them. I could even accept that sacrifice, because obviously it would be very, very, very hard to incorporate all the instruments mentioned. So I get some where it would be more prioritized than others. Fine, I would be okay with that. But none? Nothing? I was so disappointed.
Oh, so I guess this VN strength was in its characters then, right? Considering you got to meet all sorts of different people.
Yeah, exactly. And this is very similar to the Eushli titles that I mentioned before, because they are formulaic in a way. They are focused more on characters than story, and sadly story suffers greatly because of that. They have a lot of characters, they try to give them each a piece of good development. Well, it depends on characters whether or not it was good, but they try to give each character a development arc. And on that note, I kind of like it, because they have a very fresh ideas for a lot of them. That's why I keep bringing actually as a creator, because they have a common ground when it comes to that. And I knew 2 titles, and this specifically felt like playing Kamidori but worse. Because the Kamidori Alchemy Maester was the first one, and this is the Kamino Rhapsody, which was the second I played. And it had a lot of similarities, yet when it counted, that means story and world building, that wasn't really that consistent at some point, and just more a contrivance to introduce more characters than a cohesive world, let's say.
Oh my, interesting. Okay. So, but this one did have the unique premise going for it. So even though it might have been a weaker on literary values like the plot and character development, it still had the unique musical aspect. Okay. Sometimes you get that trade-off,
Yeah, and just to mention, the character developments were fine. I can fault them. Some I liked more than others, but on the most part, it was cool. I liked a lot of those, and since the sheer number of characters was a lot, like we're not talking about 5, 6, we're talking about 20 plus characters. So a lot of them, some of them joined later than others, so had less time to develop, yet they still did somehow. I can't feel like hate it, but in my opinion, story suffered greatly because they had to come up with a lot of convenient excuses on how apparently after solving this problem with this tribe, now it's time for elves for some reason. And that kind of suffered because of that. So yeah, but the overall theme of music, it was very interesting. Every single time when there was a character that contributed in some way, you get to hear internal thoughts of main character, how that works as a singular piece, and how that could work as a part of a greater whole. And that was very intriguing. It just, the potential was not realized. That's my takeaway, sadly.
What would you have done more for greater potential out of this?
I mean, two things comes to mind, right? So I don't know how to fix the conveniences. So meaning how to introduce so many factions, so many different races at the same time, and yet keep changing protagonist focus from one to the other, to the other, to the other. I don't know how to fix that. So that one, sadly, I do not know. For the second, I would definitely, okay, this is obvious. Make a song. At the important part, at the climax, this is the moment I need a song. Let all the clunking begins. But maybe introduce something that didn't work out, a song that just flopped, something that was disjoint, and then you have no excuse. You can put all the sounds together. Yeah, make a progression from bad song that has chaos, everything smashed together haphazardly, but not in the training sessions because those were cool. Just make it as a, I don't know, preliminary concert that flopped in some ways. It doesn't have to be full flopped, but at something didn't work out as well as they could, and make it a grand return at the end, let's say. I think that should be looked into.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so that was my pick for music. So what did you hear about VNs? What you brought?
I see. For me, there's one VN that always comes to mind right away whenever people mention the impact of music in a visual novel, and that is Symphonic Rain. Symphonic Rain is an interesting little visual novel. It's about a high schooler who goes to school at a specialized institute entirely about music. He plays a fictional instrument, what is it? The fortel, I think. And everyone in the school is musically inclined and are hoping to graduate with some sort of musical knowledge and degree. He is coming up at his last year, and for his final, he needs to put on a performance. And this must be a two-person performance, one with him playing the instrument and with a singer who is also using this opportunity to graduate. And so the entire plot of this is the main character deciding who he is going to perform with, and then that starts the heroine route. And then we discover some, interesting details about the main character himself and about the heroine, and they both go through some character growth. And things are not quite as they seem for many things in Symphonic Rain. Of course, this visual novel is about music all throughout its core. The entire plot is about it. There are several segments where they discuss about music's effect on people and their lives. And one of my favorite parts is that the main character will rehearse the final that he performs with the heroine, and there's different songs for each of them. because of course they're different singers and they have different styles and whatnot. And they have lyrics too, and while they're rehearsing, if you pay attention to the lyrics, they tend to foreshadow elements that occur later, or even parts of the heroine's personality herself. And it's a very cute tie-in between the story and the visual novel elements itself.
The way you describe it is... I know I shouldn't bring it up because we already switched topics, but the way you describe the payoff is... I want that. Can I have that? In the Camino Rhapsody?
I suppose so. Yeah, go for it, buddy.
No, that's my point. I want that, what you just described, rehearsal and the main song as a tie-in of everything that developed in those characters be in Camino Rhapsody. Yes, I want that. Please. But it wasn't there.
Especially
so sad.
Because these rehearsals are the part of Symphonic Rain's gameplay. It's a basic rhythm gameplay where notes scroll across the screen and you press the appropriate keyboard button when they reach the end, and you have to time it right according to the music. It's, just like Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero.
Okay.
It's a fun way to interact the two to make yourself kind of feel like you're playing the song. Some people complained about it though because, of course, the main character does have to rehearse a lot with the singer, and so you end up playing the minigame a lot. I think there's an option to skip it, but I liked it.
See.
It was a little bit of interaction.
Fair enough.
And I know you were talking about Camino Rhapsody, and you were talking about the gameplay, and I was thinking something like that, and it was really throwing me off that it was big, RPG style combat.
Yeah, it was the most normal combat. But I think they have a very polished one, so I can't really complain. It just, like you said, it kind of clashes with what they want to achieve, meaning the musical aesthetic. But instead of making a musical gameplay, they just made weapons transform or have two roles. Like, yes, this is a bass, but if I need to slay monster, this is also an axe. What? Yes, this is accordion, but if I need to slay monster, this is chainsaw. Okay. Yes, this is a harp, but when I need to slay monster, it's a bow. Wait, what the heck? That kind of contrarian.
Those poor instruments.
Exactly.
Well, similarly to your, Camino Rhapsody's party members, Symphonic Rain has multiple routes, and as such, you can go down different story beats of the main character partnering with different heroines. And again, I really appreciate just the differences in the songs, because you are playing like a legitimate song with a singer, and you hear it several times as you rehearse with them, and each of them is different, and they build toward the heroine herself to the point where, you definitely wouldn't confuse any two of them.
That's so interesting, because obviously song will change reflecting the performers, and since one of those performers is a character on whose route you are, the song that results in it will be different. That's so cool.
And I still can't hear Lisey's song without tearing up. It's like, oh,
this
had a
is
good route.
Yeah, this is something maybe a little bit off the topic from Symphonic Rain, but definitely on topic when it comes to music. I don't listen to music whatsoever. The traditional one. You think band, you think metal, you think rock, etc. I just don't at all. Doesn't appeal to me.
Interesting.
But music, for me, brings out emotions that are tied to the scene they appeared in. That's why before VNs, the soundtrack I remember the most is from Lord of the Rings. because the soundtrack accompanies a scene. So if I remember the soundtrack, I remember the scene very vividly because it was made for that moment. This is why the most memorable songs I re-listen to are tied to scenes I remember. So I can even, if for example, and even generic ones I remember from probably the most representative scene, like the Fates Bridge is a OST track that is for very intensive fighting scene that you do not know what happens. When it comes to the Door to Paradise from Euphoria, it's also a very, very engaging song that plays at the start and at the end, that as a prelude of things to come and a final resolution.
I remember when I was reading Fate Stay Night, I happened to come across the Emiya song on YouTube, and I listened to it and I thought, oh, okay, well that's all right, I guess. Then you hear it again because that's the one track that plays whenever stuff gets awesome, and you hear the real hype moments, and then I was like, oh baby, I love this. Here we go.
Yeah. Exactly. Now your perception changes because you understand how it was used.
So yeah, I feel it. Yeah, of course. In Symphonic's Rain case, its soundtrack ties itself well to the mood in general. I don't think there's many specific moments with associated tracks, or at least none that I remember. It's been many years since I've read it. But I still remember clearly how so many of the tracks really tied in to the setting of this being some fictional small town, vaguely Italian settlement. There's a whole lot of piano in all of the tracks, many stringed instruments, and I was surprised by how much guitar there is too.
Oh.
And yeah, it's never overbearing like electric guitar sort of thing. It's like it's an acoustic guitar that usually plays in the background and really gives the feel to this place. I forgot.
Yeah, I had a question. How do you feel it relates to the two parts, right? One part is obviously we're talking about school, about music. So there will be a lot of different instruments there. And I guess those sounds playing when necessary kind of sells you on that note, right? And the other part is, do you think those kind of instruments in the quantity they appear in also sells you the peaceful small town that you talk about?
Absolutely. I forgot to mention this earlier, but part of what makes the setting unique is that it's a city that always rains. It is raining all throughout the entire story. And sometimes it's a downpour, but most of the time it's pretty much a light drizzle. And it's that exact mood that the soundtrack ties into. All of the, well, not all, but much of the background music is melancholic. It's soft. It's not slow, it's very measured. To the point where like it could probably lull you to sleep even. And honestly, that's what a lot of this visual novel is about. A lot of it is going to the school, taking his classes and talking to his friends, and more often than not rehearsing for his upcoming final. And then he also goes home and writes with his friends and talks to his neighbors. It's all very subdued, and the soundtrack plays a huge part in that. But it's not just that they have, piano and stringed instruments. I was reviewing the soundtrack the other day, and I was surprised by how much variety there had. It was like, off the top of my head, I just remembered there was some tracks with like harmonica, with a harpsichord. I think there was even synth in some of them.
Whoa.
I know, right? Stuff that you wouldn't expect off the top of your head. But I was like, oh my god, there's a lot of variety, but even then, it's all still very measured. And it all fits together with the overarching setting and mood.
That's very interesting because you basically talk about how, in a way, setting dictated how the music will accompany it. Obviously, they work in synergy, one to the other, but because it always rains, it kind of forces a certain kind of musical atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very interesting. I kind of like it. Yeah.
I wish I could play some of the tracks here on our podcast, but the technology eludes us.
Yeah.
Figure it out someday, maybe.
Yeah, I was looking into that, but we didn't have it by this episode yet. But maybe in the future, yeah, we'll look into that. Because as to counter your point, I wanted to bring the example from Evenical that had, I wouldn't say the reverse, but kind of. Okay, the example was at the very beginning, you were in a very summertime, very shiny, very happy place, let's say, and you were adventurous, very much a wanderlust in yourself, upbeat, explorational, everything is ahead of me, let's go on an adventure kind of music, upbeat. But by the end of like late or middle late point, the music becomes very metallic, very unorganic, very industrious, and it no longer resembles people exploring and moving. What it does resemble is moving armies. And that's exactly what happened. That was no longer people frolicking around, adventuring. That was not the point here. So on one end, it's similar to how Symphonic Rain builds up the music to sell its setting. On the other hand, it's the opposite, because to reinforce what's happening and what climate you are in, the music completely swaps.
Oh, absolutely. Because, yeah, it sounds like you're going from a start of happy, leisurely, carefree relaxation, and then it turns militaristic. Like, oh my goodness, the soundtrack is just as powerful as the writing for that change in mood, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So, but obviously now that what I mentioned in Evenical is more of a support role, and for today's topic we are talking about how Symphonic Rain not only uses music in a support role, meaning the OST, but also as a mainstay, a central focus on how to create and perform music itself.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And on that note, when it comes to creating and performing, another example that I have is a very old title. One of the very, very first I read, in fact. It's about Kira Kira. It's an old visual novel, and sadly when it comes to translation, it suffers from the old manga gamer quality. Shaky at best, let's say. But you get the main point across. It's all about rebellion, young people forming a rock band of misfits, let's call it, and they go on a tour. They have a bus, they are driving across the country in Japan, and across the road they are creating music, performing live, and the drama surrounding how to keep the band together, focused, how to align, how different people even viewed their calling, let's say. Some joined as an escape from troubling times, some felt like performing for the sake of performing because they feel creative urge, and some as an escape from responsibilities. Yet, somehow, they all coalesce in a single band, and for at the very least that brief tour, they are together, and they make it work. And that's very wholesome, very, I wouldn't say slice of life, but it's kinda is in there. But I really enjoy how during the course of the entire story, You got to see different perspective from different walks of life and different approaches. How close to their hearts is music really, and how much their place it has in their lives. That was a really nice one about that. And like I mentioned before, for many people showcased there, it fulfilled many different roles. From the darker to the more mundane, let's say.
And there's not much mundane when groups out on tour in a rock band, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So it's an escape from daily gray life, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm. So just as much as it is about, the external problems they face, with, going on an extended road trip and entertaining the crowds, you also mentioned there's a lot to it about the character development too.
Yes.
About all of them with their own dreams they're searching for, right?
Yes, exactly. Again, it was very long time ago, so even if I were to to dive into spoilers, I wouldn't be able to name a lot of those plot points, but I vividly remember some of the routes that were very, very good.
Okay, interesting.
How basically those characters, I wouldn't say lived music, but they used music in order to make living bearable, let's say. And that was very... I mean, on one hand, it was very saddening, but on the other hand, it filled you with hope that even in the most hopeless situations, maybe you can find that one thing that keeps you going. And that was a great message to hear.
Mm-hmm. I always love the stories that can tie an external visual novel element in with the story. In this case, music, and usually it's a background aspect of the soundtrack. And in this case, it makes Kira makes it about the music, and then you can tie it in with the characters' struggles themselves. It's like, two sides of the coin.
And since this was one of my first visual novels, and they had the concert and they had the music when it was mattering on a festival, or when they were performing live, they had us one track that played. My expectation coming to Camino Rhapsody was surely they'll have a track, right? Surely.
It's a music-focused VN where they're building toward the big show. Of course they'll do it, right?
Right?
Oh well. So
Yeah.
I guess our parting message here to any listeners is, if you ever create a visual novel that's building up to a big concert at the end, please show the concert.
Yes, please deliver.
But
and on that note, I think we come to the end of this episode. We discussed all things music, from the supporting role to its central role. And I hope everybody has a great day, and see you next time.
See you all next week, everyone.